Hey guys, what's going on? So today I'm going to be bringing to you a product that I've actually been interested in getting for a while, but have really been struggling to find one in stock. I finally got my hands on it, and I'm excited to show you guys how to install it and my first take on it, and really how I think it's going to work without shooting it. It's going to be pretty interesting to see just how it feels, fits, and functions. So that is the Gen 3 Law Tactical Folding Stock Adapter. This is a very hard product to find, and I'm glad I finally was able to get my hands on it. So we're going to be converting my Springfield Saint AR that has an SBA 3 brace on it, and it's all modded up to be finished product except for the last item, which is the folding stock adapter. I put a lot of work into this gun and a lot of parts, and I'm actually really excited to put this last piece on. So we're going to go over to the bench, and we're going to first take apart this existing setup. We'll add the law folder, and we'll show you guys a step-by-step on the process we go about on how to add the folder. Okay, so we have the firearm actually set up in our vise and on our table. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, the weapon's already been cleared. We're going to want to remove the castle nut, end plate, and then we're going to want to pull out the rear takedown pin spring and detent. So we'll go ahead and put our castle nut wrench on, and we will just whack this off. So we had to break the stake there, and we'll loosen this guy here and make sure we retain all of the items that are going to come on here. Once we have that loose, we can really take this out of the vise, open it up. We'll actually just take the upper off, and a little bit easier that way. Now that we have just our lower receiver, this is where we can take out the buffer tube. We're going to retain the buffer retainer and spring. We'll reuse that, and we're going to retain the spring and takedown pin detent as well, and we'll also reuse that. So we'll go back over to the table, and we'll do all this where there's a little bit better of lighting. So once we have all that situated, the first thing we're going to want to do is take out the buffer and the buffer spring. And you do that by simply pressing down the detent, pulling it out. We're going to set that aside. Next, we want to back off our castle nut, which we've already done. Rotate the tube out of the way, and you're going to pull out takedown pin detent, and we're going to pull the buffer tube assembly right out. Making sure that the buffer retainer and the buffer retainer spring is also maintained, so we can use that for further parts. Once we get this off, we're going to want to get our takedown pin detent out of there. Well, we can just go ahead and leave it in there, actually, to be honest. It doesn't really matter. So we have our lower. This is our basic lower. You get your hammer and everything like that. So what we're going to want to do, you're going to want to keep this all the way back, and you'll take your end plate and you'll slide that back as usual, and then we will prep for our new pieces. So here we have the law folder. We have a couple of directions that come with it. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can look through these if you'd like, but it's actually fairly simple, and it's not really needed. If you know how the assembly works, then it's pretty simple. So in this package you have the bolt carrier extension and the kind of locking collar that they give you as well. We're going to set those aside here. Set the bag over. And here is the tool to actually lock this down onto the receiver. And we'll open this up, and this will be our actual hinge law folder mechanism. One thing that I do notice is it's actually quite beefy. It's just under a pound, and this is a pretty cool system that they got going on here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take a 9/64 Allen key, and you're going to want to remove the side plate assembly here. So what's going to be behind here is the bolt locking mechanism in the spring. So you're just going to want to stick this guy in here, loosen this all the way, and this is under spring tension, so be a little careful when removing this. So this is actually going to come all the way out, and you'll feel it break loose. Set that aside and remove this. and this is going to give you your locking mechanism in the spring. And lastly, it'll give you the actual, well, the locking mechanism button, and then slide that sucker right out and set those aside. So next up, we're going to take our lower receiver and we're going to mount the folder to the lower receiver. So for this, you want to put your takedown lever or takedown pin back in if you removed it, your detent, which will go in like so, and your spring, which will also go in like so. You're going to want to give that a little function test to make sure that it's captured and it's good in there. Once you get it in, gravity will kind of take its place. You then take the law folder and you arrange it like such, and you want to make sure that you actually capture the spring. That's a really important part, is securing the spring without squishing it. So once you get that in, you take the locking flange bolt that they give you and you slide that in there like so, and you take the tool that's provided and you tighten that down. So once you get to this step, you're going to take your flange tool, and this is designed to flex when you reach proper torque. So what you want to do is you want to stick it in here, and you're just going to crank it down, and when it flexes like that, you know you've reached proper spec on the actual flange ring that they provide. Once you do that, check to make sure you've got your takedown pin captured and working properly. If that's all set, you're good to move on to the next step. So the next thing you want to do is you want to put back in all of this, and this just goes in like so. Make sure this is folded back a little, and it's pretty simple. It's self-explanatory. The parts line up in a specific way. Just make sure everything goes in nice and easy. So again, this is, you're going to want to take this piece like this and stick it over like this, because you're going to be screwing your 9/64ths back into this piece here. So this just goes like this. Make sure it sits down nicely, and you can begin to thread this guy back in there. And once it starts to grab, just go ahead and crank that down. And just get it good and tight for now. We'll go ahead and tighten it back up later. So there you have it. That is the folder actually installed on the back half of the receiver. And as you can see, we're going to move on to the next step. So next up, we're going to be putting the buffer retainer spring into the lower half here. There's a hole. You're going to put that in. And then you're going to take your buffer retaining pin, and you're going to slide that over. Make sure it floats up and down, and we are now ready to install the buffer tube and pistol brace assembly. Once you get it cranked down to where you need it to be, the pin in the right spot, you can go ahead and begin to align this just how you would normally. Just indexing the 2 points here. Make sure it fits into place, and then you can go ahead and tighten down your castle nut. So once you get your castle nut tightened back down a little bit, just take your castle nut wrench and crank it down. I pretty much just crank this as hard as I can, and it never really has an issue with that. And then later on, we'll go ahead and stake this back to the castle nut so it never backs out and we never have an issue. So now we can go ahead and put back in our buffer spring and buffer. Next up, we're going to reinstall our upper receiver. So we want to get that in place. And this will allow us to move on and install our buffer extension. Now that's going to go with the rings inside of the actual bolt carrier group, and those are going to go just in like so. give it a whack, and that's it. That's all there is to this. We have a properly folding AR-15. So the install of the law folder is actually relatively painless. You can do it with the proper tools in about 10 minutes. It doesn't even take that long. You just have to be careful that you don't squish springs and that you're doing the process correctly with the right torque values. Once you get to this point, you can see that we have a fully complete pistol with a law folder installed. You're going to go ahead and want to function check this. So you're going to check your safety, and you're going to check that it works. And you have a completely safe and operable AR-15 with a folding stock. Now the one cool thing about this is you can technically shoot this folded one time, and then you can manually cycle back the action when you close the stock, and you're good to go. So just like that. One thing to note is your length of pull is going to be increased about an inch. So you're going to want to suck this down, and you have the same length that you started with, but now it's about a pound heavier, and you can fold it in half.